There is a moment in every connection with an avoidant partner that feels almost surreal. You finally reached a place inside yourself where you're not waiting anymore. You're not begging for clarity. You're not holding your breath for the next text or the next breadcrumb of affection. You've released your grip, and maybe for the first time in a long time, you can feel oxygen filling your lungs again. You're moving forward. And it's in that moment when your heart starts to free itself that something strange happens. The person who spent so much energy keeping you at arm's length suddenly takes a step forward. The one who pulled away when you leaned in begins to circle back when you step away. And here lies the contradiction that can shake you to your core. Because while you were drowning in confusion, they were calm. While you begged for scraps, they were composed. But now that you're rising, now that you're healing, they panic. And this panic doesn't show up as a declaration of love or a genuine change of heart. It arrives as a desperate move, often subtle but powerful, designed to pull you back into orbit. Maybe it's a late night text that says, "I was just thinking about you." Maybe it's a nostalgic comment on your social media that stirs old feelings. Maybe it's silence that suddenly breaks after weeks of nothing, as if your absence finally registered in their nervous system. Whatever the form, the timing is no accident. It is not love awakening. It is fear. The fear of truly losing what they assumed would always be there. This moment can feel intoxicating. After months or years of inconsistency, you might interpret this as proof that they finally see your worth, that they've been wrestling with their walls and have chosen you after all. But before you hand back the key to your heart, I want you to pause. What if this isn't love finding its voice? What if it's survival speaking? What if this desperate move isn't about you being chosen, but about them avoiding the reality of being left behind? Because here's the truth. Avoidants don't usually wake up to their feelings until the threat of losing you becomes undeniable. And when that reality hits, they don't reach for intimacy. They reach for control. When an avoidant senses you slipping away, what they often reach for is not closeness, but control. And control for them doesn't look like dominance. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It's subtle, crafted to keep them safe while pulling you back into uncertainty. Think about the timing of their return. They don't reach out when you were openly yearning, because then they'd risk real intimacy. They wait until you've shifted your energy, until you've found a rhythm without them, until you've convinced yourself that maybe, just maybe, you deserve better. That's when the message comes. That's when the doorbell rings. That's when the ghost suddenly reappears, cloaked in just enough warmth to make you question everything you've worked so hard to rebuild. And if you're not aware of this pattern, it's easy to misinterpret it. You'll think, he must really care or he wouldn't come back now. But care is not the same as connection. Desire is not the same as devotion. Their re-entry is less about a sudden discovery of love and more about the destabilizing experience of watching you reclaim yourself. Let me paint the picture. Imagine an avoidant man scrolling through his phone late at night. For weeks, he's been silent. He's convinced himself that you'll be there if and when he wants you. But tonight, something feels different. Your energy isn't circling him anymore. Maybe he saw a post where you looked radiant, laughing with friends, alive without him. Maybe he felt the void of your attention, the quiet where once he felt reassured by your pursuit. And suddenly the ground shifts beneath him. He doesn't want to step forward into vulnerability, but neither does he want to face the discomfort of being forgotten. So he does just enough, drops a line, stirs your heart, hooks your hope. This isn't about malice. It's about fear. But fear can be just as dangerous as cruelty when it pulls you back into cycles of longing and waiting. If you mistake this control for closeness, you'll hand back the power you just fought to reclaim. You'll start analyzing his words. assigning meaning to every gesture, convincing yourself that progress is happening, when in reality, he's simply soothing his own panic. The heartbreaking truth is that avoidants often confuse attention with attachment. Your presence in their orbit reassures them that they're still desired, still significant, without requiring them to risk the vulnerability of true intimacy. And as long as you're available, even energetically, they never have to face the truth of their own limitations. But when you move on, really move on, it forces them to confront a truth they've spent years running from. That walls don't protect, they isolate. And so their final desperate move is rarely about choosing you. It's about not losing the comfort of knowing you're still there. Which raises a deeper question. If their action is fueled by fear, not love, why does it pull on you so powerfully? Why does their panic pull so strongly at your heart, even when a deeper part of you knows it isn't love? It's because their sudden movement presses on the oldest, rawest parts of you, the part that once believed love had to be earned, that closeness had to be fought for, that your worth was proven in someone else's eventual return. Their silence feels like abandonment, but their sudden reappearance feels like redemption. It mirrors the push and pull you may have felt long before this relationship, perhaps even in the earliest spaces where love was first modeled for you. When the avoidant sends that late-night message or suddenly reappears, it awakens a hope that maybe you finally mattered enough to shift them. And that is intoxicating, because if your presence can melt the walls of someone who has always been closed off, doesn't that prove your value? Doesn't that mean you've finally been chosen? This is the psychological hook that keeps so many people tethered to avoidant partners, the fantasy that persistence will eventually lead to breakthrough. But here's the hard truth. Their move isn't evidence of transformation. It's evidence of disruption. Something in their world shifted, your withdrawal, your energy moving elsewhere, and it rattled their nervous system. Their outreach is not a confession of love, but an instinctive attempt to soothe their own discomfort. They're not saying, I finally see you. They're saying, don't disappear on me. And yet, in your body, it doesn't land that way. In your body, it registers as hope, as validation, as the thing you've been waiting for. This is why the cycle is so dangerous. It's not just about them. It's about the part of you that still longs to rewrite the story, to win where you once lost, to finally feel secure in love by being the one who breaks through the unbreakable. But what if that longing isn't a sign to stay? What if it's the very evidence that you've been conditioned to confuse scarcity with depth? Because think about it, when someone has been inconsistent, unpredictable, and emotionally unavailable, why does a breadcrumb feel like a feast? It's not because it nourishes you, it's because you've been starved. So when their final desperate move comes, it doesn't just trigger hope, it triggers the wound. The wound that says love must be chased, that your worth is measured by someone else's return, that stability will come only when the avoidant finally transforms. But wounds don't heal by being reopened. They heal by being exposed to truth. And the truth is the very thing that feels like proof of love is often proof of fear. And here's where your power lies. The same move that once pulled you back can become the moment you finally see clearly. Because when you can recognize their panic for what it is, control, fear, survival, you can finally step out of the loop. You can stop confusing their re-entry with a genuine choice and instead start choosing yourself. If this is landing for you, subscribe. We're just getting started. Because now we need to talk about what really happens if you answer their move and why the cycle only tightens the moment you step back in. So what really happens if you respond to their desperate move? At first it feels electric. The silence breaks, the distance closes just a little, and suddenly your nervous system lights up. It's like water in the desert. You lean forward cautiously at first, but with hope blooming inside you. Maybe this time will be different. Maybe this was the wake-up call they needed. Maybe finally they're ready. But watch closely what unfolds next. The very same patterns that drove you to exhaustion before will begin to seep back in after the initial burst of attention, after the late night text or the unexpected call. Their walls start rising again. Their language turns vague. Their responses slow down. The energy that felt like pursuit transforms back into distance. And you're left holding the same questions you once held, only now with even more confusion layered on top. This is the cycle. The avoidance nervous system thrives on oscillation, distance when they feel engulfed, pursuit when they feel abandoned. When you step back into orbit after their desperate reach, you unknowingly re-enter the rhythm that has always protected them from true intimacy. Because here's the truth. Their outreach wasn't a doorway into closeness. It was a pressure valve. It was never meant to sustain connection, only to relieve the discomfort of losing your attention. And that's why the aftermath stings so deeply. You'll notice the shift, the text threads thinning out, the calls becoming less frequent, the energy you thought was building momentum quietly dissolving into the background. You'll find yourself wondering, did I imagine it? Did I misread the signals? Was I too eager again? But the truth is, you didn't imagine it. You simply gave weight to an action that was never meant to hold you. Think of it like a magnet that repels the closer you get from afar. Their sudden pull feels irresistible. But once you step back in, the old repulsion reactivates, not because you did something wrong, but because their deepest wiring hasn't shifted. Their fear of loss momentarily outweighed their fear of intimacy, but once you re-engage, the balance tips again, and the fear of closeness rises to the surface, pushing you away just as before. And this is where many people get stuck, chasing that initial high, believing it means progress. They tell themselves, he came back, so he must care. If I just hang in, it'll grow. But what if that wasn't progress at all? What if it was proof that the pattern is alive and well? Because real change isn't about reaching out in panic. It's about staying present after the panic passes. And avoidants rarely do. This is why their final desperate move is so dangerous. It creates the illusion of breakthrough when really it's just another loop. And every time you step back in, the loop tightens. The highs get shorter, the lows get longer, and the cost to your spirit grows heavier. So the real question becomes, if responding to their move only reactivates the cycle, what happens if you don't respond at all? So what happens if you don't respond? If you resist the gravitational pull of their final desperate move? At first, the silence feels deafening. Your body rebels because everything in you has been conditioned to equate their return with relief. You'll feel the ache, the tug, the whisper that says, just answer, just this once, it doesn't mean anything. That's the old wiring speaking. That's the part of you that has been trained to find safety in instability, to cling to crumbs because they're familiar. But when you don't respond, something radical begins to shift. First, in you. Because for the first time, you break the loop. You prove to yourself that your value is not measured by how quickly you answer or how faithfully you remain available. You show your own nervous system that you can sit in the discomfort of their absence and still remain whole. That silence doesn't destroy you, it frees you. Then something shifts in them. Because avoidants expect the cycle to resume. They expect that their panic-driven outreach will lure you back into orbit, soothing their fear of abandonment while allowing them to retreat again into distance. But when you don't respond, you disrupt the pattern they depend on. You send a message without words, I am no longer playing by these rules. And here's where the power begins to turn. Avoidants thrive on predictability, not in closeness, but in control. They count on the rhythm of push and pull. Your refusal to answer interrupts the very rhythm that has kept them comfortable. And in that disruption, they feel something they rarely let themselves feel: genuine loss. Notice the difference. When you rush back, their fear of intimacy resurfaces. But when you stay silent, their fear of losing you deepens. And unlike the temporary relief they get from breadcrumbing, that fear doesn't dissolve so quickly. It lingers. It grows. It forces them to sit with the reality they've been avoiding, that their distance has consequences, that their walls cost them connection, that their old strategies no longer work. Now, does this mean they suddenly transform? Not necessarily. Some avoidants will retreat even harder, clinging to their defenses, but others, when the silence stretches long enough, are forced to confront what their panic was pointing to all along. They do care. They do want connection. But their way of holding it is broken. And here's the beauty. By not responding, you give yourself the gift of clarity. You no longer have to live on illusions, wondering if their desperate move was real love or just fear. Their reaction to your silence tells you everything. If they vanish completely, you have your answer. They were never capable of giving you what you deserve. If they come back with consistency, humility, and a willingness to stay present, then maybe, just maybe, you're witnessing something closer to transformation. But either way, you win. Because the act of not responding proves that you are no longer a prisoner of their cycle. You've stepped out of scarcity and into choice. You've reclaimed your power, not by forcing them to change, but by changing the way you show up. And here's the deepest truth. The final desperate move of an avoidant is not about them at all. It's about you. It's the invitation to finally decide whether you will keep circling the same orbit or whether you will step into the freedom of a new path. When you finally break the cycle, something extraordinary begins to happen inside you. At first, it feels quiet, almost too quiet. You've been so used to the emotional highs and lows, the adrenaline of waiting, the sting of silence, the thrill of their sudden return, that peace can feel unnatural. You may even mistake it for emptiness. But if you sit with it, if you allow yourself to breathe into that stillness, you'll start to notice something. This is what freedom feels like. Without the constant weight of waiting, your mind clears. You're no longer scanning for notifications, analyzing tone in every message, or second-guessing whether you matter. That mental space is priceless. And with it comes the realization that your worth was never meant to be tied to someone else's instability. Here's the surprising part. The absence of their pull doesn't leave you hollow. It creates room. Room for joy. Room for presence. Room for your own desires to take shape without being distorted by someone else's avoidance. Suddenly, you have energy again. Energy that once went into managing their distance now flows into you, your passions, your friendships, your purpose. And something even deeper begins to awaken: self-trust. Because every time you resist the urge to return to the cycle, you prove to yourself that you can hold your own heart steady. You learn that you don't have to chase love to deserve it, that you don't have to fight for crumbs when you were meant for a feast. This shift is monumental, because once you taste the strength of standing in your own worth, it's almost impossible to go back to a love defined by scarcity. But here's where many stumble. Freedom isn't just about walking away. It's about anchoring into the new story you're writing. Because yes, there will be moments when loneliness whispers. There will be nights when the absence aches and the old fantasy tempts you to believe that maybe if you just tried one more time, it could work. That's normal. It's the echo of old conditioning. The key is to remember what you've already seen, that their final desperate move wasn't a breakthrough, but a reflex, that it didn't create security, only another spin in the loop. When you can hold that truth close, the pull weakens. You begin to recognize that longing doesn't always mean love. It often means history, and history is not destiny. Anchoring yourself means surrounding your heart with reminders of what real connection feels like, relationships that are steady, friendships that are reciprocal, moments where you feel seen without having to earn it. These are your compass points. They teach your nervous system a new rhythm, one of safety, mutuality, and ease. And slowly the old story dissolves. The part of you that once believed you had to chase love to deserve it begins to soften. You start to embody a new truth, that love which requires you to abandon yourself is not love worth keeping. And from that place, everything changes. You stop confusing avoidance with depth. You stop equating scarcity with passion. And you open yourself to a love that feels less like survival and more like home. Because the real freedom isn't just in breaking the cycle. It's in realizing you never needed their validation to begin with. You were always worthy. You were always enough. Their panic was never proof of your value. It was proof of their fear. And now you are finally free to choose something greater. Here's the most important part. Freedom isn't a one-time decision. It's a way of being. Once you've stepped out of the avoidance cycle, the work becomes about embodying this new truth every single day, so you never find yourself pulled back into the orbit of someone who cannot love you in the way you deserve. Because here's the reality, avoidants are not rare. The dating world is filled with people who carry fear of intimacy, who will show up hot and cold, who will test whether your boundaries are stronger than their defenses. And if you haven't anchored into your worth, it's easy to slip back into old patterns, mistaking intensity for intimacy, mistaking breadcrumbs for love. But when you truly integrate this shift, something incredible happens. You stop resonating with relationships that keep you starving. The very energy that once made you chase unavailable partners becomes the same energy that helps you repel them. It's like your soul finally learns to say, no, thank you. I want more than this. I deserve more than this. And that no is not rejection, it's protection. It's the shield that keeps your heart safe for the kind of love that doesn't require self-abandonment. Because the truth is, love should not feel like a battle. It should not leave you guessing. It should not demand that you lose yourself in order to keep someone else. Real love is steady. Real love leans in. Real love grows deeper the closer you get. When you embody this freedom, your entire life begins to shift. It's not just about dating anymore. It's about how you show up everywhere. You speak differently because your voice is no longer weighed down by fear of being too much. You move differently because your body carries the calm confidence of someone who knows her worth. You make choices differently because you are no longer motivated by scarcity, but by alignment. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you no longer need their desperate move, that's when you stop attracting it. Instead of being magnetized to avoidance, you begin to draw in people who are capable of meeting you where you are. People who find your depth not overwhelming, but irresistible. People who don't disappear when intimacy grows, but instead step closer with steadiness and care. This is the transformation avoidance could never give you because it was never about them. It was always about you reclaiming yourself. Their panic, their pull, their push, it was just the mirror showing you where your own wounds lived. But now that you've seen it, now that you've broken free, you get to write a different story. So let me leave you with this. The final desperate move of an avoidant is not the moment you're chosen. It's the moment you're tested. It's life asking you, will you repeat this cycle one more time, or will you finally choose yourself? And when you choose yourself, everything changes. You step into a life where love feels nourishing instead of draining, expansive instead of contracting, real instead of conditional. Because the greatest freedom is not in getting them back. It's in getting yourself back. And once you do, the kind of love that comes next isn't born from fear, it's born from truth. It doesn't disappear when things get hard. It grows stronger, steadier, deeper. And that's the love you were always meant for. So let their final desperate move be exactly that, their final one. Not because you caved, but because you rose.